This is Dr. Toby Capwell, curator, author, historical advisor, and all-round expert on historical arms and armor. And I'm your host, Dave Jewett, and today we're breaking down a selection of scenes from the shows of Warhammer TV, including Pariah Nexus, Tithes, and Angels of Death.
The modern Astartes armor has this very distinctive neck plate, or this, it's like a standing flange that protects the neck from the breastplate. It's not a million miles away from what you see on bomb disposal armor. They have similar neck defenses. It feels like they thought, what if we had an army of Joan of Arcs? Joan of Arc seems like it really she could be a source of inspiration here.
Be sure to check out our Patreon for a longer, deeper, extended edition of this episode, as well as dozens of other Director's Cut episodes. And be sure to check the links in the description below to find Toby's upcoming book, An Armourer's Album, which is now available for pre-order. We hope you enjoy the episode, but now, without further ado, it is over to Toby.
I was there when he painted this. An oddity among his schematics and calculations.
You know all about Horus and his Heresy by now?
I do. I've read most of it. I'm finishing up The Siege of Terra, but I've read every book, every novella, every e-book only short release. I've read pretty much all of it.
It's so funny to think back when we first started working together, and I was like, have you heard this thing called Warhammer?
Yeah, well, if you're going to do something, you got to do it, right? And I felt like, this is interesting. This is something I should know about. So when I decide that, I'm going to go do it. I'm better informed than I used to be.
You're better informed about the Horus Heresy than I am now.
Well, see that shot right there. When you see the tanks coming in like that, that's a perfect illustration of why it's important to have armor. When there's all that stuff flying around, when the Marines come in, one of the main reasons you wear substantial plate armor, in its real world, is not so much to protect you against the immediate primary threat, but a really important role of armor that we often forget about is protecting you against all of the incidental threats that you can't defend yourself against. You're fighting one guy or a couple of guys in that battle, the people facing you on the front line. But what about the arrow that flies in over there, or the guy you just stepped on who stabs you in the leg, or someone who hits you in the back of the head because they're fighting someone else and they're not paying attention to what they're doing, or they don't care. All of that incidental contact. Warhammer is 40K, 30K is reintroducing effectively full plate armor alongside modern weapons or futuristic weapons that resemble modern weapons in one way or another. And they show you why their soldiers have to wear that, with the environment like that, with just the sheer volume of stuff flying around. It's an environment you can't work in without that protection. Again, we've talked before about the whole idea that the past was more advanced than the future. That's one element I like about it. But then from a design point of view, when you're having to come up with a version of 40K that is supposed to be more advanced, but also it needs to look antiquated. It needs to look like it came before this other stuff. And that combination of saying, look, it's hyper advanced, but it's also old fashioned. It's kind of like steampunk in a way, the Victorian with, a spacecraft capable of reaching the moon, or the Victorian with a time machine or whatever. It's like the old Space Marines, but with weapons we can only dream of, and we have no idea how they work now. And that's the story that the design has to somehow bring across. How do you come up with something that looks high-tech but also antiquated? And like the use of they're bringing back the Mark II armors, which I love. And they've redesigned them, but in a way I think that's very sympathetic to the spirit of it. The helmets look like medieval, or they're kind of vaguely referring to medieval 13th century helms with the slots and and that's a very clever thing to do, because we think of that medieval great helm as older fashioned than the more advanced plate armor of the 15th and 16th centuries. Most people, if they have an awareness of it, they'd be able to put your Crusader type armor before your Renaissance type armor. Most people have some idea of what's earlier and what's later.
Even as the technology and universe advances, it seems to refer to historical technological advancements, like the beakies. I love the beakies.
Yeah.
But that's sort of reminiscent of a hound skull.
Totally. A very distinctive form. It's an iconic form. You reproduce that, it becomes iconic again. And it is in the history of 40K, going back to Rin's world. Those helmets are there from the beginning because they're so iconic, but they were originally as well. Look at the thickness of those plates. That's what I love. If you needed a plate armor on a human body to protect you against high velocity firearms shells or cannon shells or everything else this armor has to protect, that's the sort of thickness it would have to be. And there it is. And they can explain that they can carry that thickness because they've got artificial muscles and the whole powered suit thing.
Well, it's as thick as tank armor.
It's got to be. But if it's going to do what they want it to do in the setting, there's a believability that's built into it when they show you the armor is that thick. No knight's armor is ever even close to that. The thickest you ever get on a 15th century armor is 6 millimeters on a field armor, and that's just on the visor where you're going to be getting hit in the face. The front of a breastplate might be 4 millimeters thick tops, but it gets rapidly thinner at the sides. But you're right, it's tank type armor on a human body, but it all kind of hangs together. This is what the armor does, so this is what it has to look like.
Well, you obviously a massive fan of the Horus Heresy, and you favour the heretical Thousand Sons.
I'm a kind of a weird one, because I'm a Thousand Sons devotee who can't stand Magnus.
Well, this will be interesting then, because since I equate you as a Thousand Sons fan, at least in 40k, Games Workshop actually sent us some Joy Toys.
Really?
And
that's nice of them.
Considering you're a Thousand Sons fan, I thought, what better Joy Toy to pass on to you?
Oh, wow. Cool. Yeah. Oh, Space Wolves. The funny thing is, my 13, soon to be 14-year-old is the biggest Space Wolves fan.
That's got to hurt as a Thousand Sons fan.
So it's a fractious household sometimes. So he's putting body parts of Thousand Sons on the bases of his figures, and I'm putting Space Wolf body parts on the bases of my figures. It's quite funny. Thank you. That's really nice.
You're welcome.
That's really nice. I may not keep it very long in my household, but he will be outraged.
He won't burn Prospero. He'll just sit quietly on the shelf.
Yeah. No, the Space Wolves have some great stories in 30K, and They have grown on me. They definitely have. Thank you. That's very nice.
If you're enjoying this episode, there is a longer, deeper, extended edition over on our Patreon. But if Patreon isn't for you, you can now support EXP by picking up a piece of our hot new merch over at expvideo.info. Although by becoming a patron, you not only help support the work we do here, but you'll also be able to watch all of our previous episodes and get each and every future episode 1 week early. Each patron massively helps support the work we do here at EXP, but whether you join the Patreon or watch along on YouTube, I want to say thank you for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, being part of this journey. But now, I'll get back to the video.
Give unto me your strength. Lend me your patience. Forgive my weakness. And grant me your mercy.
Right, so this is one of the Warhammer Plus animations, Pariah Nexus.
The Sisters of Silence are really... not the Sisters of Silence, the...
Adeptus Sororitas.
Adeptus Sororitas, Sisters of Battle. They're really interesting characters, too. Sometimes, with 40K, it seems like the inspiration for a faction or an army or whatever is sometimes found in a single character, in some literary character that brings a source of inspiration that then gets expanded. And obviously, with the combination of the image of a female warrior in armor, which historically was fantastically rare, not totally unknown, but rare. And also the Gothic architecture that, it's throughout 40K, but is kind of synonymous with the Sisters of Battle in particular. It feels like they thought, what if we had an army of Joan of Arcs? Joan of Arc seems like she could be a source of inspiration here, especially with the use of the fleur-de-lis, which isn't exclusively French, but it's iconically medieval French. They always make me think of her. But in the stories, one of the most common kind of reoccurring themes the stories ponder is the nature of godhood, the nature of divinity, and this question: if a creature has powers that are indistinguishable from divinity, then isn't it by definition divine? I mean, what is a god anyway? Someone like Sanguinius says he's not a god. I'm just a genetically engineered creature. But come on, I mean, I love that contemplation of divinity and also devotion, faith. All of the issues that come up very quickly and very naturally when you ponder the augmentation of a human, when human beings become more powerful than they are in their natural state. What does that do to their identity? What does that do to their role in society? How do other people see them? The whole concept of transhuman fear that the Space Marines have, they promote this kind of instinctual dread, transhuman dread, I think, is it called, that mortal humans naturally react.
Well, they say that in the Horus Heresy, Primarchs and the Emperor especially, like, they hurt to look at. Normal people look at these figures and it's like
they can't.
Looking into the sun.
Yeah. But that's, again, it's playing with this this concept of godhood. What is a god? At what point do you become a god? And the god that denies himself is the god that you must devote yourself to. And the real gods are the Messiah. The true Messiah denies his divinity. All that kind of thing. I've always thought that those kinds of questions go hand in hand with armor and what armor represents culturally, artistically. It's very appropriate that they bring it's very perceptive that they bring those kind of questions up. That's what gives 40K its depth.
I love that these animations let us see some of like the heads-up display of Space Marines and other.
What
other
are they
factions.
seeing? That's described in the stories. You sometimes get descriptions of what they're seeing, and it can be hard to visualize that for yourself sometimes. The gas mask will never fail to make something look creepy, will it?
Yeah, I love the Krieg aesthetic.
Well, the 1916 pattern Stahlhelms, the earliest version of the pretty iconic German 20th century infantry helmet, they're pretty futuristic for their time. Sometimes if something looks futuristic when it's created, it stays that way.
So let it be done.
It's a really nice detail here after everything this character's been through, and there's a war has already raged and she's just been through combat. You can hear the machinery in her armor struggling as she falls at her knee. And you get a sense that those servers are trying to keep her up, and she falls down anyway.
And the damage on the armor, I've always thought damage tells a story. When someone's wearing armor that's covered in damage, it's a testament to the fact they've been out there fighting and incurring that damage. If you've got someone in pristine, perfect armor, they've obviously not done anything in it. It naturally, the most beautiful, the Custodes or whoever, their armor gets trashed when they fight in it.
I really love just the sound of a Space Marine walking. Such an imposing sound, just with every footstep, the boom and the crunch.
But it would be, if you're just around horses. On the right ground, a big horse goes by, it makes the ground shake, and you hear it.
A very Salamander's thing to do, to remove your helmet to make
a
normal citizen feel more comfortable.
Sensitive. It's the same reason modern militaries don't want to cover the faces of their soldiers, because modern soldiers often have peacekeeping roles, or they need to have the local people on their side. So you can't cover the face. It's got to be relatable, even though covering the face be a good idea in a lot of situations. It's not worth the cost. In this case, the human cost of communication relatability. The salamanders are good guys, aren't they?
Well, on the spectrum of Space Marines.
They're good guys who burn people alive with flamethrowers.
Well, something we've talked about a lot before is just how much that changes the perception of the individual from either a knight taking their helmet off or a Space Marine taking their helmet off. You see the human side once more, and they become much less alien or much less
robotic.
Yeah.
But everything's in the face, in the eyes. If you take the image of an armored knight, and you put the visor down, there's no humanity. But in some pictures, I have a friend who takes a lot of photographs of us when we're doing armored fighting seminars and things. And she's really good at catching the light so that you can see the eyes of the person inside the helmet. If you go through and look at her photographs, Louise Clayton Hatch on Facebook, she takes photos at all of our seminars. You'll find so many images where you can see the eyes through the helmet, and that changes it again. It's like not one or the other. It's like the inhuman face, but you can see there's something in there, which is a very different image than just the blank robotic side of it. They play with that here. Sometimes when the Space Marine's helmet is damaged and his lens is broken and you can see that there's an eye under there, the same kind of thing. It breaks the barrier.
This is the Tithes. This episode takes place a little after what we just saw. So Sakan has had a chance to get an ally and a new helmet, but not return to orbit and get an augmetic hand. So you'll see him fight one-handed throughout this episode. And it's really interesting how it changes that dynamic and how he sort of has to rely on the Ultramarine Apothecary. A nice detail is that he's now wearing the skull of a Necron on his belt.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
After dealing with fighting a death mark and everything else in the previous episodes. In fact, I'm not sure if that is a new helmet or just his one repaired because it was damaged over the left eye.
Yeah.
But there is signs of damage and repair over that lens.
The modern Astartes armor has this very distinctive neck plate, or it's like a standing flange that protects the neck from the breastplate. It's not a million miles away from what you see on bomb disposal armor. They have similar neck defenses. But in the Heresy, in the old Heresy armors, they don't have it, and they actually describe the neck area as being really vulnerable, unlike the Mark II armors. And the Astartes learn stabbing each other in the neck. Once they've never had to fight each other, but when they do, they rapidly find the weaknesses in their own equipment. And the neck being a weak area is a theme in the Heresy. And I always really like that because we've talked before about how difficult it is in the real world to design effective neck protection. They've got these great neck plates. There must have been a time when they didn't have them and they learned that they needed them. It's there. And certain things with the weapons, it doesn't come up in the tabletop game. It doesn't necessarily really come up in a novel. But when they're animating combat, there's certain immediate physical realities that they have to deal with. And the chainsword, there's an inherent problem with the idea of a chainsword, which is that a chainsaw for cutting down trees is a tool where the rotating teeth are designed to stay in contact with the thing you're cutting. They're basically doing the job of this, right? They're doing that more efficiently and faster. But it's a tool or a weapon, if you will. It's not, chainsaws don't actually work very well as weapons because they have to stay in constant contact with the thing that they're cutting. Whereas a sword is meant to just slice something, a cutting sword anyway, the edge of a sword. It cuts something in a fraction of a second. It only stays in contact with your enemy for a fraction of a second. You don't cut in and leave your sword there. And having to leave your sword on your target is a problem that doesn't really work so well in the reality of the way weapons are used. But here you can see them wrestling with that. Like they know there's a problem with having to keep your sword there. So how do we find a way to use it so it makes sense? You've immobilized your enemy in some other way, and then you have to have this chained weapon to get through their armor or whatever.
I think it's a good way to illustrate the strength of an opponent as well, or some of their equipment, because a normal human a chainsword will cleave them in two.
Yeah.
As we saw with he was fighting the Deathcore.
Yeah.
But an armored opponent or a Necron, that's when you start to feel the resistance. And I think that the animation does a good job of showing that. It's like, this is a tougher opponent, this is more of a threat. That's illustrated through just the use of a sword that every Space Marine has, but just seeing that resistance demonstrates that this is a bigger threat.
I like the concept of a power sword a bit more than a chain sword, because a power sword stays true to what a sword is. They're just making it sharper, micromolecular, blah, 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 enhanced with power fields, yada, yada, yada. It's cuttier than a normal cutty thing, but its dynamics still make sense. But again, Warhammer is always aware of its improbabilities. It's always trying to get the fantasy and the reality to mesh as closely as it can. You look for movement styles where a chainsword might conceivably make some kind of sense, but it's a tough one.
What do you mean? Your presence is hardly reassuring, but nothing about this situation is favorable.
This episode of Tithes made me think about how conscious the Sisters of Silence have to be with their equipment choice because of how they communicate. They have to have gauntlets with individual fingers or wear just leather gauntlets because they use sign language.
Right.
They
Yeah,
can
that's
use
a
big
nice...
closed gauntlets.
It wouldn't work. They need the fingers. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Yeah, we haven't seen a Custodes arming scene before, have we? I like the close relationship between the Sisters of Silence and the Custodes as well. The kind of different aspects of the same unit. When I'm looking at Warhammer, I'm always sensitive to and interested in what their inspirations might have been, or not even as literal as that. Sometimes the designers will pick up on something that has a historical precedent, whether they know it or not. I mean, unless you sit down with the people who actually did the original designs for this, and if in the off chance they remember what the inspirations were, it's hard to be sure. But the Custodes, of course, are really iconic for this very tall, non-anatomical helmet shape, with a plume coming out of the top of it. And that's just always reminded me of certain early medieval West Asian, Russian, Belarus helmets that have been found in places like Belarus that date from like the 10th and early 11th century. That's a replica of one. But they have often these quite high conical forms, and sometimes they've got horsehair plumes that come out of the top. And then, the Custodes also have a kind of form that's suggestive of the nasal. I mean, some of these helmets of this period actually may not have had a nasal more often than not, so that one might be wrong. I acquired this helmet mainly because it has a male aventail that was made by a good friend of mine, and I wanted an example of his work. So the real typology are really interesting, and that kind of West Asian, Eastern European armor is enormously interesting, but less well studied, certainly in the English language literature. But, Warhammer, of course, we know is hoovering up inspiration from just about anywhere, European, non-European, all cultures. So, the Custodes having a certain kind of vaguely West Asian, Russian look about them. It's interesting. I don't know what it means, but I just thought it was interesting. And also this kind of very different lens shape, or the shape of their ocularium. That's a Warhammer word that doesn't get used in Warhammer. They always refer to eye lenses. Ocularium is the appropriate high Gothic word. So take note. Eye lenses and shoulder pads are two Warhammer terms we need to expunge in favor of better terminology, just to continue to, uphold my pedantic role here.
Hey, we love that role.
The Custodes also famous for using that signature combination weapon, the glaive or halberd that also has a bolt gun on it. It's important to note in reality that combination weapons are never really any good as either of the weapons they're claiming to be. Combining them usually reduces the effectiveness of either one of them. It makes the halberd too heavy, it makes the gun too hard to sight. But actually, again, in the stories, they make a point of saying that they're very difficult weapons to master. The main thing I'd be looking for in this fight is when does she use the blade and when does she use the firearm part of the weapon. And so far she hasn't really had time to shoot anything. It's been on her so fast, so it's all been the blade. It just kind of, I guess that's good.
One thing that I was interested to get your perspective of is the speed in which these massive armored figures can move. That scene does a great job of showcasing how fast a Custodes really is, but it does nothing to lessen how imposing and bulky they are. They're like two contrasting elements. You expect someone big and bulky to be slow.
Yeah, but they often aren't. Big, muscly wrestlers can move really fast sometimes. I appreciate it from that point of view just because it keeps breaking down this idea of heavily armored figures being slow and cumbersome. It need not be that way. Warhammer, I mean, the armor is like a character. It's ever present in every aspect of this. And it's never once, stooped to play to those old, annoying stereotypes, those misconceptions that are so easy to recruit for humorous purposes or to relate to an audience's expectations. They never once go that low. They tell their own story according to their rules. And it kind of transcends the unfortunate modern stereotypes about armor. And so the armor is able then to do its real job for the story. The Custodes armor still, in this setting, looks a little more old-fashioned. It's still got a lot more kind of Great Crusade era kind of reference to it. And that's a nice character distinction as well. Things like these objects on the armor that look like a kind of respirator or an old 1930s style microphone or something. They've got like these bosses with vents in them, and then they've got a pair of tubes coming off of them. That's one of a number of features that you still see on her armor that isn't present on the Primaris Space Marines, and it just connects them with that older story, which is nice. And of course, the Roman style angular lightning bolts is very much part of the earlier period.
We're into Titans now.
Yes, we're back in the Siege of Terra now.
I wanted to look at some Titans, especially of this animation, because you get to see a lot of that knightly inspiration that they have with their houses, their colours, their coat of arms.
That's a nice feature of them. That when you're new to Warhammer, you think, how do the knights, how do the Titans fit into the legions of the chapters, and the fact that they're this separate thing that forms allegiances and maybe long-term bonds with a particular legion or a particular chapter. It's quite clever that they're their own thing, because it harks back to medieval feudalism and the bonds of personal loyalty. It's not what country you come from, it's not what team you're on, it's your relationship between one individual and another individual, bonds between a family or bonds just between association. And to have the Titans have their technology is so powerful and so unique, they have to have this kind of separation. They can't just be subservient members of a particular organization. They've got to be their own thing. And that's very much in line with the way that military organization worked in the Middle Ages, where they're essentially private armies of particular families and particular regions. And yes, they have a kind of, a loyalty on paper to the king, but they may not go that way. And they have to be cajoled, they have to be negotiated, their loyalty has to be maintained, they have to be used well. They can't feel like they're just being thrown away for nothing. Their actions have to have meaning to maintain the bonds of loyalty and everything else. And I always have a sense in the Horus Heresy that the connections with the houses, they're potentially tenuous. Some are strong, like, the Legio Mortis is just always gonna go with Horus no matter what, and you're never gonna change that. But
they were called Mortis. That's
if they have a scary name, you can tell what side they're. If they have a noble, knightly name, you can tell what side they're on. And then on top of that, of course, the knight or the Titan is a metaphor for the knight in armor, the human augmented by advanced elite technology. And then on top of that, they ladle on the use of heraldry. Heraldry is used throughout Warhammer, but it's used in a very particular and especially kind of iconic way on the Titans.
Yeah, you can't get away from that. Those nightly inspirations when there's giant tilting shields
Right.
covered in heraldry
Right.
and shoulder pads, and the helmets echoing old Earth helmets.
It's pretty, like a lot of things in Warhammer, it's pretty in your face, but that doesn't change, the cleverness of it. The fact that it's well observed and well researched and it's thought out. Someone spent time thinking about this.
This animation does a really great job of actually helping to cement the visualization of how massive these things are, and how to them troops are like ants. They're like stomping over them.
But they still need to be protected against them. You still need infantry to protect the area around the base of a Titan, or the infantry will get in.
I think one of the earlier Horus Heresy books, where Titans first start to really have a position on the battlefield, there's descriptions of enemies fighting up the legs.
Right.
And when I read that, I was envisioning like people fighting up a spiral staircase in an old medieval tower or something.
Right.
It's like the 40k version of that, except this tower is a leg and it's attached to a giant killing engine that's walking across a battlefield.
And I like in the animation too that when they give you a sense of the controls and the dynamic of how they work together, there's a commonality with like submarine warfare or naval warfare, or of course tank warfare, that they have to work together. They can't move fast, so they need to anticipate where they're going to need to turn. If they're facing the wrong direction, they might really be screwed because they just aren't going to get around fast enough. And taking inspiration again from different kinds of naval warfare is a very perceptive thing to do when you're trying to make something totally preposterous seem plausible.
Yeah, a warship at full speed is all ahead full. A Titan, it's full stride.
I love in this too when they've gotten to the point when there's a sniper threat to the Titan. It's this enormous tank.
Baneblade.
In like a sniper hide. Again, it's the cleverness of scale.
So if it be a Stormblade or a Baneblade, but the super heavy tank of the Imperium.
But this taking like sonar readings and then dropping torpedoes into the area where you think something is, it reminded me again of submarines. And here you get a sense, even something that big has its vulnerabilities. Nothing's invulnerable. All armor has its weakness. If you're out there walking around, there's got to be a limit to the protective quality of your armor. And they make the Titans seem really vulnerable all of a sudden. They're sitting in this Titan and they're kind of panicking a little bit, But everything has its weakness. All troop types, all vehicle, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. And the cleverness, the good military commander finds the perfect balance of different arms and different troop types.
For the Emperor!
This is Angels of Death. It's a Blood Angels series. Very stylized. It's all black and white, except for anything that should be red. But the black, white, and red gives this a very unique aesthetic.
Yeah, it's like Sin City or something.
Yeah.
Color means that much more when it's largely absent.
It's nice that, because it focuses mostly around a single Blood Angel squad, but they all have their own unique characteristics. Despite largely being armored up, you could tell who's who, either by weapon, armor, actions, voice. That's one of the things.
So when does this take place now?
This is 40k.
40k,
yeah.
But the old helmets are still there.
That's one of the things that helps differentiate the squad members, is that they've all got a different helmet. Which I think when they're going for this style, right, it's primarily red that we're seeing, I think they needed to differentiate the characters with more than just voice and stature.
But you can do that. Individual armors look different. Once you get used to it, a particular helmet is just as distinctive as a particular face.
What do you think about the Terminator designs, the 40k Terminator designs?
Well, I haven't thought about them too much. I haven't built any. The Terminators in the Horus Heresy are much more variable. They're all kind of the same class, but from Legion to Legion, their kind of appearance and their characterization varies a lot. The 40k Terminators are much more kind of consistent. Very distinctive helmet shapes. It's an interesting question of, with a Space Marine, you already have something that's very heavily armored and hits very hard. What's the heavy version of that? in functional terms, they don't make a lot of sense, really. You would never need a double-barreled machine gun because your single-barreled machine gun already has such a high rate of fire. Having two of them doesn't really make any kind of sense, but as an expressive device, it helps make that distinction.
It's not only two bolters bolted together, it's two bolters bolted together. These giant Terminators can wield one-handed.
Yeah, and the fact that the Terminator armor is very technologically advanced, but now a very rare technology that can't be replicated. It's not just their gear. The Terminators themselves are veterans and have to have a certain amount of experience to be put into that gear. They find a number of different levels to distinguish them from the average Space Marine.
This is weirdly quite an emotional scene coming up with Blood Angel's Dreadnought. There's been a few games to feature Dreadnoughts and cinematics that go along with those games, like Dawn of War especially, but it's still been quite difficult to get a sense of how a Dreadnought moves or its mobility. This animation and one of the final scenes in Space Marine 2 do a great job of showing how mobile, how quick, and how dangerous a Dreadnought could be.
And how much character it can have, too.
I really enjoy these shots of the Tech Marine because there's a number of times through this series where he's having to interact with the screen or a computer, a piece of machinery, and last bolts or auto guns are just plinking off him, and he doesn't even think about them.
It's the essence of using any armor is knowing the armor's capability. What do you actively have to deal with, and what can you ignore?
Even in the 41st millennium,
A Tech Marine's frustrated with technology.
a bit of a kinetic encouragement.
I like
Call it.
their kind of laminated faceplates. It's very distinctive. Tech Marines usually make great characters.
Depending on the chapter, they're sort of looked at with distrust because they've been away for so long.
Yeah, right. Questionable loyalty, maybe.
Yeah. Are you with us, or are you actually for the Mechanicus now? Yeah, this ending scene with the Dreadnought is sort of heart-wrenching.
There's not a lot left to him, really.
A Dreadnought saying they're cold. What a way to go. That was me. I was watching this like, yeah, cool action-packed 40k, and then, you've made me feel emotion. Thanks for that. Didn't expect that, especially from a Dreadnought, but bravo for creating that moment.
Dreadnoughts, they often make great characters.
I would have liked to see the skies of Baal one last time.
Thank you all for watching. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes featuring Dr. Capwell. Links to more of Toby's work can be found in the description below. And as always, I want to give a massive shout out to all of our supporters over on Patreon for supporting EXP and for helping us make cool stuff like this. If you have any thoughts, be sure to share them in the comment section below and make sure you subscribe to EXP so you don't miss out on all of our future episodes. But until then, thank you again for watching, and we will see you real soon.
Movement!